No matter how far away she lives, how her body lies in the ground, or how long it has been since you last spoke, she will always be a part of you. Not only does she live on in your memories, but she is also a structural element of your mind. The mother complex is a powerful yet terrifying force, and Carl Jung forewarned of it. Not only does the woman matter, but so does the emotional imprint she left behind, an unseen power that influences your decisions, your voice, your relationships, and your self-perception. Not the caring exterior you presented to the world, but the mental legacy of unfulfilled desires, unspoken anticipations, and ancestral anguish. This is what Jung referred to as the shadow mother. I hate to break it to you, but you will never get over your mother unless you confront her, not the external one, but the one who is inside you. This land is both holy and horrifying to many people. As Jung put it, nothing has a stronger influence psychologically on their environment, and especially on their children, than the unlived life of the parent. When you take on your mother's suffering, guilt, silence, and sadness, you end up enmeshed in someone else's life. Your soul starts to fade as you become her echo, her defender, and her extension. Rather than laying blame, this is a rallying cry for self-discovery, for the unloved parts of yourself to be embraced again, for the unspoken sadness of your inner child to be acknowledged, and for the burdens that were never meant to be carried. We are not trying to assign blame in our investigation. Rather, we are illuminating the depths of your unconscious mind. The path to liberation does not lead to bitterness toward one's mother, but rather to an inner confrontation with that figure. Watching this film will take you on an inner journey that will take you beyond the boundaries of your broken heart and your ego as you begin the metamorphosis that occurs when you make the decision to let her go. Find out why you haven't been able to move past the mother wound, how it has affected who you are, and how the profound teachings of Carl Jung can help you not only survive, but also take control of your life. You are free to shed your childish persona, and that is the basic, though not easy, truth. It is okay for you to let go of the burden of someone else's sadness. You may change the storyline by approaching your mother mentally, which is a terrible but necessary first step. First, the mother archetype and her function in our collective consciousness. According to Jungian psychology, the mother figure is more than just the person who gave us birth. She is an innate part of our collective unconscious, an eternal transpersonal representation embedded in our collective consciousness. Mothers appear again in dreams, mythologies, and human relationships because they are archetypes, according to Jung. These patterns are universal and psychic and are inherited rather than created. She is timeless. She is more than just personal. There are two sides to the mother archetype, the one who gives life and the one who takes it away. This is what Jung referred to as the dichotomy of the great mother, and the smotherer. It is a picture that predates human civilization and stands for stability and instability, new beginnings and endings, embrace and engulfment. This archetype resides beneath your biological mother's historical identity and is not connected to it. The earth herself, as well as religious icons, mythological figures, and symbols of nature all feature it. A mother's role is dual. She provides nourishment and also poses the threat of eating you. The personal pain of those who bear unresolved traumas from their moms entangles this character. When we mistake our biological mother for the archetypal mother, Jung said, we go into a psychological maze where we relive our painful childhood experiences in our adult relationships, where we want to be nurtured but are afraid of being too close, and where we want to be accepted but are afraid of being rejected. Disintegration of the archetype causes psychological distortion. The mother character in dreams can take on many forms, from a nurturing protector to a terrifying devourer. Her mythological personifications include Demeter, Kali, Mary, and Medea. The mother archetype, according to Jung, embodies this duality, existing simultaneously as creator and destroyer, holy and profane, good and evil. We disintegrate when our minds refuse to let go of one side while denying the other. Denying the mother's shadow by idealizing her is the same as rejecting her light by demonizing her. Regardless, we are prone to projecting our own problems onto others, whether it be our partners, mentors, bosses, spiritual instructors, or anybody else who carries the emotional burden of being a mother. True healing of the mother wound cannot happen on a surface level, and this is why a lot of individuals stay stuck. Jung emphasized the need of transcending individual grievances and embracing symbolic vision. We stay mired in the ego tale when we see our mom solely through the limited prism of our formative years, her abandonment, her fury, and her control. However, profound change becomes possible when we perceive her as a conduit for ages-old energies and acknowledge that our suffering is archetypal rather than merely individual. The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parents, observed Carl Jung. Often, the mother is the conduit through which the unlived life of a parent, their shame, guilt, and grief, is transmitted to her children. The mother complex develops when a child takes on their mother's emotional reality and uses it as a reflection rather than a memory. When a child experiences emotional neglect, they may internalize the belief that I am unworthy of love. Similarly, a child who is smothered may internalize the belief that I am not allowed to be separate, to be free. These voices do not go away as you grow older. Instead, they become your inner monologue, continuing to dictate your self-perception, body image, voice, and ability to love, belong, and thrive. If these internal pictures aren't brought to light, people will subconsciously look for answers elsewhere, in sexual relationships, in material success, or in spiritual bypassing. But nothing will change at the core. Even now, the scar says, you are still not enough. According to Jung, a mother's pain is biased. This is not just an individual's misfortune. It is our shared legacy. Like emotional DNA, it is a psychic pattern that is passed down through the generations. Mothers unwittingly pass on their children's suffering, suppressed emotions, and loss of connection to their feminine essence. In Jung's view, healing wasn't about altering the mother, but rather about reshaping one's connection to the inner mother, that intricate network of thoughts, feelings, memories, and projections housed deep within a mind, until someone, maybe you, musters the strength to confront the mother image within and declare, this story ends with me, therefore the cycle continues. This is a wholly monumental task, for the reason that genuine change cannot commence unless you face this inner reflection. Mother Earth is also the mother. Nature is her essence. The unconscious is her essence. Disconnecting from our inner mother also means distancing ourselves from our bodies, from intuition, from nature, and from the enigma of what is beyond. Like the dark, we are afraid of our emotions. Our overemphasis on the logical, masculine, and controlled causes us to neglect the depths of our souls. Neglecting to see the archetypal mother has high costs: ongoing worry, unresolved grief, dysfunctional relationships, creative obstacles, spiritual emptiness, and a pervasive feeling of not fitting in. According to Jung, this is a mental health crisis, the result of a generation that has lost touch with its feminine origins and the great mother who gives birth to both physical and spiritual beings. Here we are at the threshold. Are you able to see your mother as more than just the woman who harmed you? Are you able to see her as a portal into the primal psychic energies that molded her? Is it possible for you to see the archetype at work in both of you? Without giving in to blasphemy or idolization, can you bear her imperfections and your pain? We're not talking about forgiveness here. We are talking about freedom. Just like a mother, you'll keep going in circles until you can clearly see the mother picture as a mirror. Insight won't reach the unconscious, and healing won't be thorough. But you stop looking for love in her shadow when you meet the ideal mother head-on. Vast, strange, paradoxical. At last, you start to be yourself, and that means getting back to the basics. The second one is the psychological shackling and the shadow mother. One of the most dreaded and misunderstood aspects of Jungian psychology is the shadow mother. She lacks the protective, nurturing, and guiding qualities associated with the maternal archetype. Whoever consumes is she. She is the one that follows, chokes, manipulates, and stops the soul from growing. She shows herself in myths, dreams, and the silent misery of maturity. According to Jung, this consuming quality is inherent to the archetype and not an exception. She gives birth and eats it all. She makes and keeps. Furthermore, the ego becomes trapped in a psychological prison when this element is not confronted with awareness. Mythological manifestations of the shadow mother include: as the dragons protect the holy treasure, Ida will not let Persephone escape. When a mother's energy goes beyond its normal limits, she emerges psychologically, taking on the role of goddesses who consume their children. When concern masks dependence, when safeguarding turns into possessiveness, and when affection turns into control. Rather of being hugged, the infant feels devoured in these moments. As a result of the mother's words, "I simply want what's best for you." Encasing the toxic energy, the youngster is unable to identify the maltreatment. Upon internalizing the belief, "My freedom is abandonment, my autonomy is betrayal," the spirit quietly falls. This power seldom enters awareness in obvious ways, Jung said. Its hold is delicate, concealed under layers of upbringing and ancestral shame. As an adult, it could manifest as a paralyzing lack of confidence, a constant inner critic that mimics mom's voice. The emotional topography of the mother wound may manifest as an irrational fear of disappointing others, an inability to feel secure when on one's alone, or an unconscious desire to romantic partners who exert control, diminish, or stifle one's autonomy. Guilt is what happens when you attempt to do things like set boundaries, tell the truth, or escape dysfunction. You are ungrateful. You are wicked. You are selfish. This is psychological infantilization, a condition Jung cautioned against, where the ego stays little and dependent, physically an adult, but emotionally bound to the demands of the mother. Even if you change your identity, relocate to a different city, or live across the ocean, you will always hear her voice in your thoughts when you are hesitant to speak up, take action, or even live. Energy entanglement, not physical distance, is at issue here. The ego is still a helpless infant, dreading falling out of line as it circles the mother's gravitational pull. The shadow mother is the familiar, predictable, and deceitfully soothing hell that Jung stated the mind prefers to the unknown heaven. People remain in harmful relationships, not because they take pleasure in the pain, but because it strengthens their emotional connection. Until this pattern is recognized, people will keep repeating the same conditions, thinking they're making free choices when they are actually reenacting the myth of the consuming mother. Pain turns into loyalty, and self-betrayal into love. What is the most effective tool for mothers? I am guilty. Primordial guilt, the irrational dread that one's own death awaits them if they depart from the group, rather than the healthy guilt that rectifies moral failure. The psychological restraint that Jung characterized as stemming from archetypal fear rather than reason is this: I will betray her if I be myself. I will be bad if I go. Rooted in the primordial dread of being separated from one's own body, this guilt has been around for a long time, and many people, crushed beneath its weight, refuse to move forward, stifling happiness, denying reality, and giving into fear of showing their true colors. Interestingly, according to Jung, the shadow mother serves a dual purpose. She imprisons her children and also protects their souls. A dragon watches over her from a distance. In order to reclaim your own name, you will have to confront old, the monster. There is purpose to the suffering she inflicts. It is a rite of passage, not to destroy her, but to regain what she holds captive, the right to exist, to feel, to create, and to choose. This is why the hero must meet her in myth. Assimilation, not destruction, is the objective. Jung proposed engaging in an intentional inner discourse with your own devouring mother as a means to achieve this goal. Imagine who she is. You converse with her. You convey the anger, the sadness, the treachery. You allowed the orphan to express himself. You silently allowed her to share her thoughts. Instead of evildoers, you confront a wounded archetype whose perception has been warped by generations of shame, fear, and unfulfilled need. Something changes when this process is done with sincerity. As a result, the mother lets go. Feelings of being a youngster start to surface. The mind starts to realize that it is its own property. This clash represents a metamorphosis from dependent infant to independent adult, a psychological death and rebirth. Depression, emptiness, sadness, and breakdown are common symptoms of this phase, according to Jung's warnings. This falling apart, though, is holy. It is the destroying of passed-down delusion. Although it's a first, the ego feels exposed and genuine. Light, not external illumination, but the inner radiance of the spirit, might emerge from this shadow. Please understand that the shadow mother is not out to get you. At her feet is your entrance. She is the terrifying instructor, the feminine force that begs you to wake up, and she is strong. By facing her head-on, not to place blame, but to reassert your own identity, you unlock the path to liberation. You start to make your own decisions and stop acting like a child who is always seeking to please. Your ascension is a tribute to what your mother was unable to accomplish, not a rebellion against her. This is about more than simply becoming well. It's about freeing one's ancestors, releasing one's mind from its shackles, and reconnecting with one's spirit. Not ease, but wholeness, the rarest and most potent gift of all, awaits those who tread this path. Thirdly, there is the internal mother, also known as the silent dictator. The internal mother is a powerful psychic force that rules with an uncanny stillness within the enormous, unconscious architecture. She rules without raising her voice. Even when she doesn't hit, she forms. When a child's biological mother dies, moves away, or becomes estranged, the child may continue to have a psychological echo of her maternal presence, what Jung called the internalized mother imago, that remains hidden in the unconscious for the rest of their lives. Our mother's influence on our thoughts, emotions, decisions, and relationships is not merely a memory. It is a dynamic, autonomous complex. As she whispers into the adult soul what the kid had unquestioningly accepted as a youngster, she becomes the unseen ruler of the inner realm. From the moment we took our first breath, our mother, or whoever stood in her stead, became the primary reflective surface through which we first perceived ourselves. Her expression, intonation, hug, and retreat all told us if she thought we. In this world, we are either warmly welcomed or at most tolerated. Jung theorized that these formative experiences are not just retained in memory, but are mythologized inside the soul, concretized into the mother complex. The mother imago, a symbolic image imbued with emotional energy, significance, and legendary weight, is formed by this psychic constellation. The tragic part is that the imago is usually wrong. Our impression of our mother, shaped by our immature minds and our will to survive, is more accurate than her actual self-presentation. A source of intrinsic value and safety, the internal mother could be a kind, sensitive, and reliable figure. However, in her absence, rejection, criticism, or entanglement, she transforms into an unseen saboteur, a force that shapes every connection, risk, and dream. When this voice is mistaken for the self, the individual becomes chained to a ghost, equating inherited programming with inner reality. Her voice may murmur things like, "You are too much, you are not enough, don't speak, don't shine, stay small, stay safe." Jung cautioned that this happens when the self is overlooked. When a mother withheld praise or used affection as cash, the inner saboteur is born, not from insecurity alone, but from internalized criticism of that mother. Depending on how it manifests in our minds, our inner mother can be an echoes of disappointment, a directive to put other people's needs before our own, or a subliminal fear if we venture to deviate from our assigned responsibilities. At times of growth, her voice appears, as if to beckon us back into the comforting confines of uncertainty. Jung went on to say that when this hidden self isn't acknowledged, it is projected onto others, including friends, professors, bosses, and romantic partners. All of a sudden, our unfulfilled maternal need becomes the emotional prism through which we view people, rather than their actual selves. Their supposed healing abilities are being called into question. A disproportionate amount of anxiety, dependence, or fury is how we respond to them. We unwittingly choose partners who perpetuate the identical emotional dynamics we are attempting to flee from as we pursue the illusion of being selected, cared for, or acknowledged. Confusion, disappointment, and emotional repetition ensue when a negative mother is not assimilated and acts as a filter on reality. At its worst, the internal mother turns into an energetic vampire, not in a figurative sense, but in a more literal sense. She snuffs out our energy, tames our inclinations, and puts out our imaginations. This shows up as a lack of motivation, emotional detachment, apprehension about making risky choices, or an inability to make decisions free of guilt. As if stuck in time, the person is alive, but disconnected from reality. Rather from being free, the soul is enslaved to a static mental representation of its past, which Jung saw as a form of possession or inner colonization. Paradoxically, we continue to be devoted to her despite the fact that she may have hurt us or been cold or nasty. The mind holds on to the picture in the vain hope that it will help them remain little, submissive, and hurt enough to win her heart. However, this was deemed a tragedy by Jung. The internal mother is not changing, which is an illusion. She exists only in my mind. She is not the actual thing. Our self-abandonment will deepen regardless of how much we bend over backwards to win her love. Jung maintained that in order to recover, one must consciously separate themselves, not from their biological mother, but from the internalized image that enslaves their soul. To do this, we must identify the mother complex by its true name. Active visualization, introspection, dreaming, and symbolic ritual all lead to a direct confrontation with the inner figure. It necessitates giving up to the repressed emotions, anger, loss, betrayal, yearning that have been banished. It challenges us to reawaken the suppressed part of ourselves, the limits we were afraid to set, and the strength we had to give up in order to stay alive. The right to live as an individual, not a shadow, is being honored by this distancing, which is not rebellion but individuation. Disarming the shadow will require more than that. The good aspect of a mother archetype, the one who nurtures, protects, and inspires, must also be reclaimed, according to Jung. This is not the result of wishful thinking or stubborn refusal to face reality. Rather, it is the product of establishing a fresh bond within, one that is based on strength rather than weakness. Mothering ourselves comes gradually through loving self-talk, carrying rituals within, connecting to mythological feminine symbols, and engaging in creative and embodiment practices. This allows us to reassert the aspects of our minds that we had to bury in order to stay alive. We do not become enlightened by envisioning figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious in the sphere of the mother complex. That darkness resides in the internal mother, the silent dictator, the inherited voice, the ancestral pain. This is according to Carl Jung. We will stay tied until we confront her, not with animosity, but with understanding. Once we do, though, we enter a holy realm. We grow up to be adults who embody the healing feminine's ferocity and compassion, rather than children who constantly crave approval. Now we choose, rather than waiting to be chosen. Now that we love ourselves into completeness, we no longer need to be loved. And it is in that act that the inner mother's spell starts to dissolve, and a higher self starts to emerge. Carl Jung said that the symbolic separation from the mother complex is one of the most holy and terrible milestones in psychological existence, and that this separation is necessary for the independent ego, the fourth and final separation. Instead of rejecting mom as an individual, this is a struggle against the archetypal force that binds the ego to its former state of unconscious allegiance, dependency, and fusion. There can be no individuation no real I, and no fully awakened life, according to Jung's warning, unless this separation occurs. This is more of a profound psychic rite than a social event. It's a death and rebirth that happens under the surface of the normal adult battles with boundaries, identity, and purpose. Anyone who hides behind their mother imago, whether out of shame, imagination, or unconscious terror, acts not from a place of self-possession, but rather from the roles they were handed down from generation to generation. The submissive child, the silent pleaser, and the internal orphan. This inner separation, which Jung compared to waiting to be seen, is like giving birth again. Both liberate the spirit and the physical form. The painful unbinding provides the springboard for the mature self to rise, not in defiance, but in respect for what needs to change. However, a large number of people oppose this principle. Even though it's necessary, people are terrified of the separation. Jung listed the following as the binding forces: the dread of complete annihilation, the innate fear of death that children feel when they separate from their parents, the shame of betrayal, the psychological belief that becoming an individual is a lack of gratitude toward the source of our life, the security of familiarity, which can make suffocation feel better than freedom, and the cultural reinforcement that prioritizes external loyalty over internal authenticity. According to Jung, these are more than just nervousness. They're forces that every person must overcome in order to achieve wholeness, since they are archetypal currents in the collective unconscious. The results are significant when people try to avoid being apart. Ego hijacking by the child archetype occurs in adults. An hidden and unhealed inner child asks for permission to be real beneath the surface of our polished lives and high-functioning positions. Even though they inhabit the bodies of adults, these people are unable to assert their inherent power. They put things off till later, put off making decisions, stifle their wants, and fear failure. Not because of the thing itself, but because of what it would mean to their remaining mother. This was not immaturity, but rather psychic imprisonment, according to Jung. Real distancing is the path of the hero. The descent into the unconscious forest, the battle with the dragon of the mother's shadow, the transformation of the protector into the jailer, and the devourer into the giver are all part of it. Ancestral memory's painful stillness is strewn along the roadside with anger, bewilderment, and loss. But to ignore this summons is to lead a life controlled by fear rather than by spirit. Repetition of the unresolved drama of the mother complex in every relationship, work, and unfulfilled desire awaits those who put off this journey to the brink of existential despair. To rise above one's ego, one must first die to it. This is the psychological crucifixion that Jung dubbed the death of the compliant child, the one who had previously thought that love could only be acquired by subjugation. Instead is the sovereign adult, who is born unpolished and imperfect but alive and ready to take life on the chin. Just like any other birth, this one isn't pretty. It calls for shedding tears over lost innocence, broken dreams, and unfulfilled desires. However, a vast and terrifying quiet follows death. Jung argued that the empty space is a holy place. This is the void that appears in our minds when our mother's voice is no longer present. It becomes problematic only when we fail to occupy this void with our own thoughts and feelings. The shadow of our mothers will return, more subtle and all-consuming, until we seize the space with our own ideals, ambitions, and inner voice. This is why liberation isn't sufficient on its own. What follows is creation, the edifice of a fresh interior framework. It is created by one's own self-awareness. It is not passed down via generations. At this point, as the person passes across the threshold, the sovereign ego starts to awaken. Here we have the steady ego of self-confidence, not the inflated ego of superiority. Authentic expression, rather than acting to impress or perform, is what this type of person is all about. Alignment, rather than fear or guilt, drives its decision-making process. It doesn't seek rescue in partnerships, but rather to share. Rather than seeking clarity, this ego welcomes mystery. It respects its own voice and does not seek praise. A spiritual truth is concealed behind this procedure. The separation from the mother complex was seen by Jung as involving more than just the mind. It occurs when we leave the familiar realm of the mother as group and the mother as safe haven and enter the unfamiliar but sacred realm of the individual. The self is more than just an ego's plaything. It is also our inner compass, our blueprint, and the driving force that compels us to follow it. Breaking free of the mother complex is not a rejection of love, but rather an acceptance of the truth. By doing so, we start to see ourselves less as script followers and more as partners in making meaning in the world. Structure aids in its development. Whether it's through sacred symbolic gestures, dream work, writing, or painting, Jung knew that milestones needed to be marked. We shape the shapeless. We tell our mom, the old is over. We tell ourselves, I honor you, but I no longer belong to you. I belong to myself. We construct our shrines not of stone, but of courage, of standing firm, of being honest, of taking breaths without worrying about being punished. So, being apart isn't betrayal. It's a commitment to living. Becoming a vessel large enough to contain the sorrow of the past and the splendor of the future is what it is to truly live. Having it is the first step in discovering who you are. Without it, you'll only be going in circles. According to Jung, man's task is to become conscious of the contents that press upward from the unconscious. The beginning of navigating the maze of the mother complex involves the courageous and lovely act of releasing. The fifth mental sign of a mother's unhealed wound, a view from depth psychology. As Carl Jung famously observed, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This is certainly true when one considers the latent, poisonous consequences of a mother's unhealed wound. Dormant and unexplored mother complexes do not go away. Rather, they spread to other parts of the mind and quietly influence one's thoughts, actions, feelings, and relationships. Jung cautioned that these are not haphazard accidents or eccentricities of character, but rather archetypal patterns, the outward manifestation of latent, unresolved energy. Here we will delve into 9 profoundly psychic symptoms that indicate the existence of an unresolved mother wound. These symptoms extend well beyond the individual and touch the core of the collective unconscious. One is the relentless inner critic and persistent self-doubt. When a child's unresolved mother wound manifests as an incessant inner monologue asking, sabotage, you're not good enough, who do you think you are? This is no ordinary case of self-doubt. Rather, it is a psychic echo of early life events in which love was withheld, approval was conditional, or vulnerability was punished by virtue of logic or morality. The burgeoning self is repressed by this voice, which punishes the ego. Like a parasite, this sophisticated, independent part of the mind feeds on the ego's efforts to develop, according to Jung. 2. Aversion to independence and an obsession with being dependent. For those who bear this scar, the desire for and fear of independence are inseparable emotions. Despite their need for autonomy, they freeze up when left to their own devices. Every choice seems like a gamble, every victory like a betrayal, and every setback like a way to keep the suffering mother image's invisible loyalty. Jung interpreted this pattern as a return to the protective embrace of the archetypal mother, where one buys protection at the expense of their own identity. 3 things: the weight of guilt, shame, and family history. Attempts to break free from the mother complex are accompanied by a profound and nearly sacred guilt. Says it all. If I thrive, I betray her. If I grow, I abandon her. It's not guilt about yourself. It's remorse about archetypes. The idea that one's chances of life are dependent on the mother's emotional condition is its rudimentary origin. According to Jung, this is the unconscious psychic inheritance of a mother's regrets, restrictions, and suffering from her unlived life that the kid carries about with them. Number 4, the habit of putting other people's needs before one's own. Some people learn to self-abandon after being hurt by their mother's criticism or conditional love. Ego, which is still taught to please, sacrifices what is good for it, what makes it likable, or what gets it accepted. When you say no, you feel guilty. Setting boundaries feels like a threat. This, according to Jung, is the ego acting as a submissive kid, afraid to face the anger of the inner mother and unsure of how to use its own voice as a sacred tool. Number 5, being drawn to people who bring up the hurt memories. People that are emotionally aloof, critical, domineering, or suffocating tend to attract other people who exhibit similar behaviors, which can be quite hurtful. Repetition is not an act of stupidity, but rather the mind's symbolic attempt at healing. As Jung pointed out, the unconscious does not seek vengeance, but rather healing when it externalizes unresolved trauma. Unfortunately, we can't see the projection and will continue to equate suffering with love since we confuse repetition for inevitability. Number 6, the deep pain of feeling inadequate. The constant drone of "I am not enough" is a silent command passed down from one's mother, whether she is absent, neglectful, or has impossible expectations. This belief shows up as an obsession with perfection, trying to do too much, feeling guilty about it, and apologizing if you feel happy. Jung understood this as the cries of the undiscovered, unrealized child within. Affected by the absence of comfort, the repression of original thought, and the terror of speaking one's mind. Both nurturing and creative capacities are embodied by the mother figure. Creativity and expressiveness feel risky when that archetype is injured. Fearing rejection, having their voice cut off, and having their light turned off, the person becomes immobilized. The consuming mother archetype, according to Jung, can cause an individual to subconsciously dread rejection or even retaliation if they dare to shine. Semantic symptoms and the body's cry for healing. The body verbalizes what the mind keeps quiet about. Jung noted that the division between being nurtured and consumed can show up physically as symptoms of unresolved complexes, such as exhaustion, anxiety, autoimmune diseases, and eating disorders. In fact, these symptoms are the body's symbolic language pleading with a wounded ego to make amends with the neglected inner child and not some random illness. A sense of spiritual estrangement and an existential vacuum. When a mother's wound never heals, it leaves a gaping hole in her relationship with the Great Mother, the feminine principle. Forever seeking an elusive identity, the person may experience a profound sense of spiritual abandonment. Nothing fulfills them as they seek approval, prosperity, or bliss. This, according to Jung, is the soul's need to reassert its bond with the archetypal mother, the place from which it once drew its vitality, knowledge, and sense of self. One last thing to keep in mind before we wrap off this section. The mother wound symptoms are signals, not indications of personal weakness. There's been a loss, neglect, or burying of something vital, and the soul is crying out. Instead than blaming our moms, Jung emphasized the need of retrieving our projections, confronting our exiled parts, and reclaiming our true selves. For healing to take place, it is necessary to learn to hang on to the past without letting it control you. Unless you become aware of it, your unconscious will control your life, and you will refer to it as fate. This is not a metaphor, but a road map through the world of mother wounds. It starts not with pointing fingers, but with self-awareness. It does not begin with defiance, but with reclaiming what rightfully belongs to you. It is now up to the adult who wants to see themselves, the once unseen child. Freedom is born there, and healing starts there. Jungian depth psychology's holy framework for embracing the shadow mother as a right for personal change. Initiation at the level of the soul occurs during the confrontation with the shadow mother, which is more than just therapeutic. For people who desire completeness, this contact is crucial, according to Jung. No amount of rational contemplation or superficial acts of forgiveness can mend the scars left by a mother's abandonment. It calls for an unfiltered symbolic journey into the depths of the mind, an encounter as timeless as myth and as personal as your own pulse, and a meeting with the archetypal mother shadow. The Negrado, also known as blackening, is the initial step of the transformational ladder in alchemical symbolism. As a result, the youngster ensnared in the mother complex experiences the demise of illusion. At this point, the idealized mother's lovely veil falls away, and the archetypal feminine's devouring side becomes apparent. According to Jung, this shadow side is sacred, not wicked. It holds the dormant embers of one's soul. In her terrifying entirety, the shadow mother possesses the keys to independence, originality, and strength. She guards a treasure hidden in terror. Observation is the initial stride toward incorporation. The second you muster up the courage to look at her, indignation starts. A soul's initial act of defiance and reclamation is to perceive the shadow mother objectively, without romanticizing or rejecting her. It takes guts to see how she used the child to numb her own sorrow, her want to possess or control, her manipulations, and her fear of abandonment. As long as we hold on to the idea of the perfect mother who gives her all for her children, we will never be free to embrace our adult selves and their holy authority. Submerged beneath the child's obedience is sadness, and behind that grief is wrath. Rather than illnesses, these feelings are sacred energies, pieces of the soul confined by shame and terror, as Jung stressed. In order to find healing, it is necessary to face the anger caused by betrayal, the pain of being invisible, and the loss of a mother who is unable to provide the necessary nurturing for the soul. Expressing one's sorrow does not mean regressing. Rather, it means rising above it. A return of the soul can be facilitated by ritual, art, or even quiet tears. Connecting the conscious mind with the autonomous figures of the unconscious, Jung's approach of active imagination involves dialoguing with the shadow mother. Not to fight the shadow mother, but to listen to her voice. It allows us to engage in a living conversation with her. Ego changes occur when she opens up about feelings like fear, jealousy, sadness, or loss. I'm a grown-up now, not a little kid begging for favors, but someone who can listen, articulate, and stand firm in their own power. Holiness emerges as the false dichotomy of all good and all wicked fades away. It is not the physical mother who dies, but the mental prison she may still stand for, that dies with her symbolic tyranny. This symbolic death is sacred in Jung's mythopoetic perspective. However, it typically comes with nightmares, emotional storms, and disintegrating beliefs. In it, the heroes descend into Hades to confront the dragon, and Mother Shadow is reflected, and then he or she rises again. The mother is spared death, but the ego's delusion is. The liberation of the spirit, the reintegration of the rejected feminine, is what is born. Along with breaking hearts, the shadow mother rips at the very essence of femininity, including our intuition, sensitivity, joy, sensuality, and openness. These aspects of ourselves become terrifying when we dread our mothers. However, merging draws people together. We start to have faith. We now openly express our emotions, a release of the suppressed knowledge we once had. Just as a soul remembers its right to exist, we create, feel, and love without the need for permission, just like a child. To Jung, this was a crucial step toward healing, particularly for societies that suppress the feminine archetype. Change and emancipation rights need to be marked. A declaration of sovereignty in a holy location sends a message to the unconscious mind that something has changed, and the mind requires ceremonial and symbolic behaviors, such as writing unsent letters and burning them in a ceremony or making art. According to Jung, rituals are like doorways. They herald the passing of the old self and the arrival of the new, uniquely you. Your reign is over, they say to the shadow mother. I respect you, but I'm not your property anymore. The development of empathy recognizes the mother as a person. At the end of it all, the mother, whether internal or external, becomes human, wounded, flawed, but human. She is no longer a goddess or a monster. She is just a mother. Insight, not duty, is the source of genuine compassion, according to Jung. This empathy does not justify the wrongdoing, but it does release resentment. After letting go of bitterness and re-establishing a connection to life's river, the spirit is able to breathe freely once more. The sixth and last reflection is this: to confront the shadow mother is to go down into the cave where your freedom and terror coexist. Devotion to one's truth, one's soul, and life itself is what this represents, not aggression. Individualization, or the coming of age of the complete self, was what Jung called this path. A rupture, then mourning, and finally rebirth are the stages it follows. Jung said that coming to consciousness is always painful, but that once you get over that agony, you will be free. Free to live your life not in response to your past, but in service to yourself. Free to love not out of want, but from fullness. Free to die not as a child, but as your own sovereign soul. The eighth, letting go, is more important than forgiving. As a shadow that may stealthily follow the brighter light of inner change, forgiveness is not the healing's crown in Jungian psychology's sacred language. Since no genuine recovery ever starts with social duty or performance, Carl Jung refrained from making forgiveness the focal point of the individuation process. Rather, he emphasized that the real journey starts with a far more challenging task: facing one's own pain head-on, even when that pain was caused by the same hands that were supposed to support them. Jung firmly believed that genuine forgiveness cannot be artificially created. For those around you, it is neither a ritual nor an indication of your spiritual superiority. When a person regains control of their own psychic destiny and realizes they don't need external resolution to feel complete, this is the subtle, natural result of soul retrieval. If it comes, forgiveness is a result of integration, not an absolute need for freedom. Premature forgiveness, according to Jung, can turn into a disaster. An alternative to inner fire, psychological bypass, involves the use of a sedative. Most of our religious and spiritual upbringings inculcated the idea that forgiving is the same as virtue. Forgiveness is a disguise for unspoken anger, sadness, and betrayal when it is hastily given out of guilt, religious obligation, or the fear of appearing unhealed. Instead of emancipation, this kind of forgiveness satisfies the mother complex. A more primal form of healing must first take place, and that is to recognize the repressed, the shamed, the denied, the kid who waited unnoticed, and the voiceless. Feeling these facts, according to Jung, is not regressive, it is revolutionary. A person has to lament the years they gave up in devotion to a phantom, the mother they never had, and the control that choked their being. This is about spiritual liberation, not attacking mom. When a mother is perceived for what she really is, a flawed, injured human being, rather than as a mythical figure, neither angel nor demon, healing can begin. Through this process of becoming more human, she is able to let go of the projections that held her power and over her head and break free of the psychological prisons that have been holding her back. The window of opportunity to forgive may open in this calm after the storm has passed and the rupture is healed. Even then, it can't be forced. It has to originate in a self-reliant spirit. Freedom can still exist without it, and this is the most important realization. For Jung, forgiveness is not necessary for emancipation. Integration is what's needed. The person must reintegrate their soul's fragments, their voice, feelings, anger, and tenderness, into their conscious existence. Instead of punishing the mother, they should set limits so they can regain the interior space that she once controlled. Individualization, not reconciliation, is the aim. Moreover, as one follows that road, ancestral scripts of shame and identification start to fall apart. Part 8 of the Jungian Psychology series concludes with the following thought: forgiveness is not the goal, but rather a leaf that may fall when one's self-sufficiency has flourished. Restoring one's own authority is the real path, not reconciling with others. It is the subtle uprising of not lying to get love, not suppressing your feelings to keep the peace, and not changing your truth to make other people like you more. According to Jung, only the man who can consciously assent to the power of the shadow within himself can overcome it. When it comes to the mother complex, this means that you can no longer rely on forgiveness to let you go. It signifies that you get up, take back control, and decide to liberate yourself. Not when it's safest, but right now. Rebirth beyond the mother complex is the last passage. The sacred passage into a new life, rather than the climax, is the healing of the mother wound in Jungian depth psychology. Not only that, it signifies the conclusion, the ion of agony, but also the metaphorical demise of the identity formed by willpower, quiet, and passed-down grief. A new beginning starts with that death. Embracing the independence of one's true self frees one from the shackles of ancestral duties and unseen allegiances. Jung emphasized that in order to achieve psychological wholeness, one must first consciously address their mother complex, mourn its loss, and integrate it within themselves. This is a spiritual transformation, not just any healing. As the mother complex loosens its hold, the ego's framework that was constructed upon pleasing, performing, and maintaining the family myth starts to crumble, leading to the breakdown of the false self. Jung cautioned that this disintegration frequently comes after a catastrophe, a collapse of identity in which previous ideals become hollow, direction vanishes, and the center no longer holds. The alchemical process begins with this holy bewilderment, at the blackening phase when the old must fade away to reveal the buried gold. Something more fundamental, the rise of the independent self, is stirring in the vacuum that has been created. Instead of the reincarnated infant, the adult who has broken free of the mother's imagined gaze emerges from this psychedelic realm. Instead of being led by shame or yearning, this self follows its own internal compass. This new person takes care of themselves as a parent rather than looking for approval or rescue. They start to walk with calm authority rather than an air of apology, and they prioritize presence above performance. According to Jung, this is the reawakening of the sovereign or the self-existent center. Unraveling an inherited script is necessary for rewriting the inner myth and transforming one's identity. The conditioning that says, I am never enough unless I earn it, I must sacrifice myself to be worthy, needs to be broken free of the mind. A new myth, inspired by awe for one's own reality rather than a desire to alleviate the mother's suffering, takes its stead. For Jung, this inward reworking was a sacred rite, a way for a person to emerge from the shadow of a family tragedy and write their own symbolic life story. Respected limits of self-expression. There must be boundaries set up, not to punish, but to safeguard, as this new reality unfolds. Clarity is required while dealing with the external mother, should she be present. Recognizing and gently disempowerment of the internal mother, her voice of shame, fear, or guilt, is essential. Boundaries, according to Jung, are not cutoffs of love, but rather proclamations of identity. As an adult, you should respect the hard-won territory of yourself and be wary of regression along these mental boundaries. Restoring one's connection to their inner mother requires letting go of the desire for external nurturing and instead focusing on nurturing oneself. This is where we reclaim the classic inner mother, not as a critical voice, but as a kind, caring murmur. Caring for oneself become an ongoing practice. The value of rest is elevated. Feelings are respected without contrition. According to Jung, this represents the return of the feminine principle, the point at which being is no longer a limiting factor. The bell is ringing in this room. We go into the depths of things, discovering the subconscious, the architecture of the mind, and how our relationships mirror our growth as individuals. Leave a comment below if you have any questions, themes, or wounds you would like us to address in upcoming videos. Because of you, this place is life. Here, your opinion is not only valued, but very necessary. Not only did you show up to this video, but you also showed up to the sacred labor of remembering your true self to your inner job. Plus, keep in mind that your spirit will recognize, not with terror, but with calm, when the perfect person shows up. Up until then, though, allow the bond you build with yourself remain your closest companion. Therein lies the house and its support system. All things true originate from that state of completeness. I will meet you on the road till our paths cross again.